On 10 May, the Germans struck not directly at France but at the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The Netherlands was overrun in a few days of ruthless fighting, and when an Anglo-French army left its prepared positions to assist the Belgians, it was cut off from the main French forces by a German thrust through Luxembourg and the impassable country of the Ardennes. German armored divisions penetrated a gap between the Maginot Line and the British defenses along the Belgian border and reached the Channel by 21 May. In the days that followed, they worked northward along the coast, threatening to cut the communication of the British Expeditionary Force, the BEF. Farther south, under sudden assaults by aircraft and fast-moving armor, French resistance began to crumble. In this desperate situation, the War Office called upon the 1st Canadian Division, now one of the few trained and equipped formations in England, to restore the communications of the BEF with the Channel ports. General MacNaughton was sent by destroyer late on 23 May to study at first-hand the situation at Calais and Dunkirk. Meanwhile, his divisions began to move to Dover for embarkation. At Calais, MacNaughton found the British defending a close perimeter. The garrison could not be expected to do more than hold the Germans off. He then left in the same destroyer, reaching Dunkirk before dawn on the 24th, despite attacks by enemy aircraft. The port was weakly held, but 2 French divisions were moving into position to defend its approaches. That morning, the Germans cut the road between Dunkirk and Calais. Later that day, MacNaughton returned to London to report what he had seen and heard to a meeting of the defense ministers and chiefs of staff, over which Mr. Churchill, the new Prime Minister, presided. Obviously, Canadian reinforcements could make little difference to the situation at Dunkirk, which was intended to be the main evacuation port of the BEF. The troops, waiting impatiently aboard ship at Dover for the call to action, glumly disembarked and moved back to Aldershot. 2 days later, their hopes revived when some of them were again sent to Dover, but once more they remained in port. Belgium capitulated on the 28th, but although the Canadians were again warned for movement, none of them ever went to Dunkirk. The British Isles were now in the gravest danger of invasion. Tanks, artillery, and equipment had been left behind in France, and little remained at home. The troops ferried back from Dunkirk brought only their small arms. The readiness of the Canadian Division therefore assumed a vast importance as it moved with ancillary troops to the Midlands to form a self-contained Canadian force, ready to strike at any enemies who might penetrate the flimsy eastern defenses. And through Dunkirk week, there it remained. Although the Germans entered Dunkirk on 4 June, they did not attack Britain. To them, France was still the primary antagonist, and on 5 June they struck at General Weygand's line on the Somme and Aisne. By the 9th, the invaders had reached the Seine. Next day, Italy entered the war on the side of Germany. On the 12th, Weygand advised his government to seek an armistice. The French army, previously considered the finest in Europe, had been cut to pieces by the German blitzkrieg. A desperate plan to hold an Anglo-French redoubt in the Breton Peninsula resulted in the 1st Division again being ordered to France. 1 brigade, ancillary units, and some artillery disembarked at Brest on the 13th and 14th of June. However, the military situation in France was beyond repair. On 14 June, German troops marched unopposed into Paris, and although the Canadians moved inland, it had already been decided that the small force available could not hold out in Brittany. Later that day, the advancing Canadians were abruptly ordered back. So, after only 48 hours in France, the Canadians found themselves again in Aldershot, bitterly disappointed and translating CASF as Canadians almost saw France. They had been ordered to destroy their vehicles and guns before embarkation, but since the Canadian artillery commander had flatly refused to leave without his guns, these had been stowed aboard and brought back to England, where they were more than welcome.